Thank you, Stephanie, for those words this morning. Someone who grew up an Army brat, my father was a career Armyman, I can really relate to her story of a military lifestyle and the idea of having self-resilience and learning skills that oftentimes aren't taught to young girls at home. Our next speaker is Ambassador Carlos Hernandez. His Excellency is the Ambassador of Argentina to Qatar. He holds a master's degree in political science, a degree of professor in social sciences, and a PhD in international relations. He's had a prolific career ranging from disarmament to oil and gas. As a diplomat, he has served in several Argentine embassies and permanent missions, such as New York, Vienna, and Geneva, as well as serving as a United Nations official. He is an avid supporter of women's rights, and today he will highlight how women in politics help the global economy. Please join me in welcoming His Excellency, Dr. Carlos Hernandez.
Good morning to everyone. I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce, Mrs. Aisha Al-Fardan, and of course Conchita, who has been always in contact with us. Unfortunately, I'm the speaker after my good friend, the Ambassador of Canada. I don't have her charisma, but I have to say I listened carefully to her speech. And I didn't go to the military, Stephanie, but I can cook, I can iron my clothes. I can't probably help with the cleaning because I'm too lazy, but I will try, I will do my best. So I will look a little bit formal, a little bit boring if I compare myself to Stephanie. But I want to start this speech, with an introduction and a conclusion of the G20. You know, the G20 is a group of countries. In fact, there are 19, which is composed by the most influential economies in the world. The G20 in year 2018 took place in Argentina. We had the presidency of the group, and they have a group which was a subgroup related to gender equality. I would like to read the introduction and the conclusion of that group. The introduction was saying that building equal, inclusive, and strong societies and economies, and ensuring that men and women have the same rights and opportunities in the labor market is a fundamental imperative for gender equality and a growing and prosperous economy. Failing to tap the participation of all women in all their diversity not only implies a violation of their human rights, but also reflects a waste of talent, skills, and abilities that inevitably impacts on the national development and poses a demand for social justice. In a full potential scenario in which women play an identical role in labor markets to that of men, as much as 28 trillion of US dollars could be added to the global annual GDP by 2025. In the conclusion of this subgroup, they were saying that many barriers to women's economic empowerment are still present in society today, and failure to achieve economic empowerment of all women will mean failure to achieve the 5 SDGs of the 2030 agenda, especially the gender equality goal. Do you know that when I was, something that it sounds funny, but it's not funny, it's real. When I was reading a little bit about these issues, I discovered which is the country with the best ranking of gender equality. Does anybody know which is the country here? Probably no, I didn't. It's Iceland. In Iceland, we know that usually women live longer than men. In Iceland, they live more or less the same. And the funny thing is that because they included women in the national economy, they achieved to live longer. Men live 4 years longer than the average of all European men. So there is obviously something good in including women in the national and global economy. It's for our benefit as well. Now we will go to some figures. The gender differences in laws affect both developing and developed economies and women in all regions. We have to know that globally over 2.7 billion women are legally restricted from having the same choice of jobs as men. Of 189 economies assessed in 2018, 104 economies still have laws preventing women from working in specific jobs. 59 economies have no laws on sexual harassment in the workplace, and 18 economies, husbands can legally prevent their wives from working. I mean, this is information of the World Bank. We also know that women remain less likely to participate in the labor market than men around the world. Labor force participation rate for women aged 25-54 is 63% compared to 94% for men. Women remain less likely to participate in the labor market than men around the world. When including younger, age 15 years and up, and older women age 55 and up, in 2018, women's global labor force participation rate is even lower at 48.5%, 26.5 percentage points below that of men. And this is information of the International Labour Organization. Women are paid less, bear disproportionate responsibility for unpaid care and domestic work, and are overrepresented in informal and vulnerable employment. Women are more than twice as likely than men to be contributing family workers. The gender wage gap is estimated to be 23%. Women earn 77% of what men earn, and they spend around 2.5 times more time on unpaid care and domestic work than men. Also information of the International Labour Organization. So let me just take this, the Argentine experience in what is gender equality. I come from a country, in a sense, similar to Canada. I mean, we respect gender equality a lot. Probably Canada is more developed, but probably we started before them. Argentina is a pioneer for women's political participation. Women in policy will influence, of course, national economy and global economy. There's no doubt about that. The Women's Voting Act, or Suffrage Act, was unanimously approved by our Congress in 1947 and signed into law a few days later by the most popular president we have in history, called Juan Domingo Perón, during his first presidential term. Anyway, it was not the achievement of a man. The achievement was of the first woman who was involved in political issues in Argentina. Probably you heard about her because she was also a romantic figure all over the world. Her name was Eva Perón, or called Evita. She was the main fighter in favor of social and political rights for women. This legislation approved allowed more than 3.5 million women to vote in the 1951 general elections. But not only to vote, I mean, they were included actively in participating in the Argentine economy. I mean, there was really, we're thinking about 1947, year 1947. Does anyone know, for example, let's go to a very developed, civilized, beautiful country like Switzerland. Do you have an idea when women have the right to vote? Well, it was in 1971. And the last province of Switzerland allowed women to vote in 1990. So in Argentina, at the end of the war, they have that right in 1947. I remember that one of the things that this lady, who was, in fact, everybody wanted her, Evita Perón, to be president, or at least vice president of our country, but she resigned. She didn't want that honor. She wanted to fight for women in another way. And one of the things she said is, I demanded more rights for women because I do know what women have to put up with. Let's keep going with the Argentine experience. In 1991, Argentina was the first country in the world to adopt a law on gender quotas, which established the obligation of incorporating at least 30% of women in the party list at the national level. From this moment on, affirmative action measures spread not only to the rest of the region, but around the world. I have to say some countries now improve more than our country, but anyway, we kick the ball first. The number of women in chamber at the Congress, in our Congress. In our Senate, we find 30 out of 72, which means 41.7%. In the Chamber of Deputies, 92 out of 257, which means 35.8%. We are ranked in the world 28, but moving up. And the year of our first female chair of parliament was in 1973. About our women in politics, I mean, this lady is Evita Perón. She was the first one, of course, let's say the mother of all civil rights and political rights in Argentina of women. But we also have other presidents. We have two other presidents that the second one had 2 terms at the presidency, and she's a candidate right now to be vice president. The last lady is Gabriela Michetti. She visited Qatar a couple of years ago. And of course, we have secretaries of state, ministers, senators, deputies. For example, I know that she's going to hate what I'm going to say, but my wife, who is now the ambassador's wife, when she was 27, she was already the general coordinator, the Homeland General Coordinator. This means that security forces were under. Now, keep going with this. I mean, we have the legislation that can bring gender parity. Something is not working. Anyway, I have to say that to achieve equality, we have in Argentina a new law since December 2017. In the next legislative elections, which are going to take place right now, October 2019, all the list of candidates for Congress, for Parliament, must necessarily alternate male and female candidates. That's an obligation to ensure equal participation in both houses. Most probably, this is, the first measure of this kind, if not in the world, for sure in Latin America. Other initiatives that we have in Argentina, for example, is the opening of the UN Women's Office. This was the result of an agreement between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the regional representative of UN Women. This office was opening on the 4th of October 2018 in the presence of our First Lady, Ms. Juliana Aguada. Argentina also joined the Spotlight Initiative, which is an initiative held together with the UN representative in Argentina and the European ambassador to Argentina. It's an initiative which prevents the elimination of violence against women. Argentina also joined the Win-Win program. What is the Win-Win program? This program involves 40 Argentine private companies currently applying the women's empowerment principles. And it was launched with a view to promoting gender equality in the business environment. I'm not going to describe all the points that you can already read there, because it's probably too long, but I'm just trying to show how committed is Argentina with gender equality. Going back to the G20, and their subgroup on women in 2018, they have a target, an institutional target, which was to put gender equality at the core of the G20 meeting. And they have a strategic objective, which was promoting the role of women in economic and social development through 4 major working areas: labor inclusion, digital inclusion, financial inclusion, rural inclusion. If we go to labor inclusion, we can see that 50% of all the women in the world have no income of their own, 50%. Women represent 60% of university graduates, and I have to say, I remember when I went, I think it was this year, when we have a ceremony with the Qatari graduates, and I was completely shocked that probably 80 or 90% were women with honors, and just a very small number of male students. Anyway, they are only one-third of the workforce. When we go to digital inclusion, I'm talking here about the G20 countries, We have a gender gap of 200 million in access to mobile telephony and 250 million in access to internet. And there is no doubt nowadays that participating in the digital world is a necessary skill to enter the labor market. Here's another surprise. When we go to financial inclusion, only 40% of women in the G20 countries, and we're talking about the most important countries in the global economy, only 40% of women have access to a bank account. Despite owning 30% of small and medium businesses, women receive only 10% of any form of credit granted by banks. When we go to rural inclusion, 27% of all female employment is in agriculture. Women produce 50% of the world's food, but only 4% receive income of their own for the job done. I mean, it's, as you can see, it's not an easy matter to be solved. But I mean, what is important is that women get involved in politics, get involved in economy. One of the many challenges women face in the workplace is the obstacles preventing them from reaching leadership positions. I think Stephanie mentioned that before very clearly. According to an ILO report, only 19% of board seats are occupied by women, and less than 5% of the CEOs of the world's largest corporations are women. Only 2 out of all G20 countries have parity in the government cabinet. These countries are France and Canada. In the rest, women's representation is significantly lower, and in 2 countries of the G20, women have no representation whatsoever at that level. You can see some of the contemporary women really involved in our economy, directors of very important international banks, JP Morgan, International Monetary Fund. I mean, they are very active women, so we have to say that all what we can do is to support participation of women in the economy of the world. They are doing it well. Also, if we go to a political side, let's go to 2016. We have the election of the UN Secretary General. Probably nobody pay attention to this. But in the official candidates, in the shortlist of official candidates, there were 5 female, 5 male candidates. It was a draw. One of the female candidates was our ex-minister of Foreign Affairs, a woman. In the candidates which were withdrawn, there were 2 female candidates and 1 male candidate. Altogether, you have for that position more women than men. Anyway, probably because he deserved it, a Portuguese professional, a man, Antonio Guterres, was elected. But anyway, the participation of women was very, very important. It's increasing, and that's very good. I'm not going to talk about Qatar because we all know how things are going. They're going well, and women are participating more and more in every area of the economy. Since I'm almost finishing, I don't want to be too long, but I just need to mention something. Since we're talking about global economy, we do know that climate change is a very important part of it. Climate change is very important. And there was something that was covered many years ago. A lady, she was an American lady, born in Connecticut. Difficult for me to pronounce in English. I think it's Eunice, it's a difficult, rare name, Eunice Newton-Foot. In 1856, she made a research, and this research discovered the greenhouse effect. I mean, climate change. But she was a woman, and we're talking United States, 1856. She was allowed, of course, to do the research, but since she was a woman, she was not allowed to present it in public. A man had to do it, another scientist, Joseph Henry. And the first words of Joseph Henry were, when he was presented her work, was, "The sphere of a woman embraces not only the beautiful and the useful, but the true." Now I'm going to, of course, I forgot, we had the first Nobel Prize in Economics, the first female Nobel Prize in Economics. That was very important. Till that time, they were all men, not only men. And I would like to finish this speech with words of a man, Robert Zoellick, ex-World Bank president. I think this is the most intelligent phrase I have heard. Equality is not just the right thing to do, it's a smart economics. How can an economy achieve full potential if it ignores sidelines or fails to invest in half of its population? Thank you very much. Thanks.